Welcome to Dead Headspace, a part of Silver Shamrock's Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation. Audio listeners, I am currently wearing a Ron Kelly t-shirt. It covers his 6 years with Zebra Books. Zebra Books, if you're unfamiliar with them, not a problem. Me and Brendan were too. I would advise you horror nerds to check it out. But he has his 8 covers that he did. He wrote 10 books in 8 years. The 2 weren't published because they closed down Zebra Horror Line. But the t-shirt covers the 8 that were published. It's a really neat shirt. He's got other shirts, other masks, other merchandise. The very best way to reach out to him and get one of the shirts is to find him on Twitter, on Instagram, or Facebook. Twitter is RonaldKelly4 is his username. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody, and I'm so sorry that Patrick called you nerds a minute ago.
With love. Today, we're talking to the author of Below, amongst many other books, Kev Harrison. Say hi, Kev.
Hello there.
You're so friendly. Okay, hey, man, congrats on joining the Silver Shamrock family. Like, that's... Before Brandon and I became a part of the network for Ken, for his podcast network, we were really big fans of his the publishing company, and for good reasons. They have a good thing going, and we read Below, and you're part of that for a reason. So congrats on that, man.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really exciting for me, actually, to be part of Silver Shamrock. And like, just to echo what you guys were saying, I think they've done some really interesting things, have taken some stories that maybe other publishers wouldn't necessarily have taken chances on, and which have then done really well and got really great stories out into the world, which is, what we are all here for.
Absolutely. Brendan, jump in before we ask our baseline question, but what I've noticed the 2 years that they've been up is, you got people from all over the world with all different stories I would never hear if I was still in the East Coast of the U.S. And I love it. And the anthology, man, like every year, it's my opinion that's the anthology to be in. Brennan will be in that, and it has been announced already. So you both are in the family of Silver Shamrock. So congrats on that. Brennan, why don't you take over, sir?
Yeah, I would echo what you said. There's a variety to their catalog, and there's certainly some books that, with the editor, with Ken Kane, there's, some stories in there that not every indie publisher would take a risk on because they believed in the author's original vision, and they believed that with a little guidance, there's potential there. And when you put out two books a month, it's really hard to, make contact with the ball on every one, but it's, they've been doing it for a while now, and it does seem like there's a whole lot more hits from that catalog than misses. And that's commendable, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what? We haven't recorded an episode since I came back from Scares of Care. So if it's all right with you, Kev, on this subject I'd like to talk about super quick. It's related to Silver Shamrock. You know what? I just noticed Ken let me sit at the table and just represent the podcast and whatnot. And it was pretty cool. There were a lot of people at the table that were excited to talk about all the books I had laid out. He basically laid out the books that the authors that were unable to make it have representation for their novels, anthologies, and whatnot. And it was really cool meeting people in person. Ken was telling me I wasn't there for the last day. I had to go back to my home, and saying that Tom Atkins stopped by real quick, main actor in Silver horror. I can't talk. Halloween 3, where Silver Shamrock, that name derives from. So if you are unaware of what Scares of Care is, if you're listening to this and you're like, I wonder what that is, I would check it out, Google it out. It's a really cool con. It's a charity event, and there's a lot of friendly people there. So let's dive into you. All about you, Kev. Sorry for taking it away from you.
We've completed the obligatory Silver Shamrock ass-kissing portion of the program.
Yeah, Ken's going to pay us money for this, so that's why I do it. But Kev, what got you into horror, man?
Well, negligent parenting, which I think is not actually that uncommon.
No, it's not.
So, like, horror movies being rented out with other like sort of family favorites as well, and my dad just like showing them in whatever order. So, like typical 8-9 years old. Like it's Saturday afternoon, let's watch Nightmare on Elm Street, or let's watch The Howling, and that kind of stuff. And then that film kind of obsession kind of just continued. Also, quite a lot of like sort of ghost story TV and stuff in the UK. I remember Ghost Watch when I was about 10, like scaring the living crap out of me. And then reading wise, like also again negligent parenting. My dad and my uncle lived with us for a while when I was growing up, and they had like a bookshelf of James Herbert, Stephen King, and I would just start dipping in again from like sort of 8, 9-ish. I suppose I didn't understand like all of the thematics of those books at that age, but it certainly gave me this hunger for dark stuff.
What books specifically do you remember, diving into early on that made an impact?
I've talked about this before actually, and the big one for me was The Rats by James Herbert, which as an 8-year-old, I think I picked it up, 8 or 9-year-old, I picked it up because cartoony sort of cover art of this grotesque rat, sort of like bits of gore sort of spread around behind, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. And when I read it, I think I found it less fun than I had imagined, because the horror, like kind of different elements of the horror kind of were there that I wasn't necessarily expecting, like like claustrophobia when everything came down, like the emotional lives of the characters as everything was going to shit, like this kind of stuff, like was the stuff I wasn't prepared for, and the stuff that really scared me much more than like rats eating corpses and stuff.
I got a question. It's the only question for tonight from a, well, I can't really call him. He does listen, so fuck it. He's a listener. We got a question from Mr. McKinley. He said, how did an Englishman end up in Portugal?
Okay. Well, that's a good question, and quite a long question, I suppose, because like when I came out of university, I had that thing which maybe some of you guys can be familiar with, where you just like go, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. And so I started doing a job like working in a telecommunications company that I was already working at part-time, just doing some crappy weekend thing. And I got into financial stuff. So I was doing like financial analysis for about 10 years in different companies in telecoms and utilities. And then I realized like, I hate this. Like I really, really hate this. And I also had a lot of issues with a lot of elements of UK culture. And so I decided I'm just going to take a redundancy that was offered to me and do a teaching qualification. And then I went to Turkey and then Poland and then Portugal and then went, this is home. Awesome. And there we are.
Wow. So, okay, let's pick that apart. So
yeah, that's a lot of stuff there. Sorry.
No, really, on you. I'm genuinely very curious and like different points of your phases of going from one country to the other. So first off is, what about the UK is it that you're not a super big fan of?
Quite a lot of stuff, but especially like this is going to sound really weird, but like not feeling particularly safe, like when you're just going about your daily business. Like
really,
it's really interesting because like British culture, like if you're out in the street like on a Wednesday afternoon, like it is really safe in most parts of the country. Like you can do whatever you want, but because of the relationship that British people have with alcohol, which is a really not good relationship. Like if you go to most town centers, like of an evening, say Friday, Saturday, by about 9:30 p.m., there's going to be a lot of people staggering around like blind drunk, and a fair few of those are spawning for a fight. And it just became so routine for me, like either to avoid town centers at the weekend, which is kind of ridiculous, or to like just always be mindful that like you've got to watch everybody in case somebody shows signs of being the guy that if you catch his eye, he's going to say, what are you looking at? And then be swinging for you. And, I'm not a big chap. I am not well prepared to defend myself. And frankly, don't really want to have to either, just like, on a regular evening. So that kind of really ticks me off. Also, the other things that are obvious, like the weather, cost of living is very high, that kind of thing, but those are kind of like day-to-day issues. But the violence thing is something that I really thought was just normal. And then I started traveling, and I went to places, and I was like, no violence here. Let's go somewhere else. No violence here either. How strange. And then I thought maybe it just is like an English thing. So yeah, I just thought, howdy.
Where about in England? Like, were you in London or were you in another city?
I've lived all over, really. I've always traveled a lot. So like I grew up in Surrey, which is like just southwest London. It's kind of like posh commuter town for the city of London itself. And it was pretty bad there. Then I went to university in the Northwest Midlands, so like between Birmingham and Manchester, if you have any idea about UK geography at all.
I know that's a big city, isn't it?
Northwest, yeah. So so that was, again, the same. I've lived in Birmingham, I've lived in London. Probably London was the safest I felt, ironically. And I think it's because it's such a melting pot there. You know, like in London, there are so many cultures. Like I remember working in an office once in London with 43 staff, and there were 34 nationalities among those 43 staff. So you kind of don't get the same level of like that English, let's get shit-faced and fight each other kind of thing. So yeah, so I kind of lived, I think I lived in about 7 places in the UK overall, and it was mostly the same.
So I've scribbled down next to your name, not a soccer hooligan. That's good to know.
But I do like I do like football, just not the fighting.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Soccer.
I was gonna ask about that. That makes me think of that Elijah Wood movie, Green Street Hooligans, which I fucking love it. But I wouldn't want to be in that movie.
No, definitely not.
Us Boston boys, Dennis, Larry in particular, would say they're douchebags.
Yes. I could not agree more.
Yeah, we got that here too. It's a big reason why, like, I got a lot of Irish pride. I'm from a town that's 30 minutes south of Boston. I've never been to a St. Paddy's Day parade in South Boston, which it's at least it was heavily populated by Irish Americans for a reason. There's a lot of drunks, and I'm a big guy, and I've quite literally been called out randomly by strangers. Hey, you big guy or whatever, and they have come up and tried to fight me. So I avoid those situations too, because I ain't Joe Lansdale. I can't whoop ass.
Exactly. Yeah, if I was a major martial artist, maybe I'd look at things differently. I don't know, but I am definitely not.
Do people actually start fights by saying, "Hey there, big guy"?
It just came to me. No, but there was this one specific time, Rainham Walmart parking lot. If you're not from the area, you're gonna be like, where the fuck is that? Doesn't matter. But they just said, hey, they said, hey, Four Eyes, because I wear glasses, and I looked at them like I was buzzed. My friend wasn't drinking. I was, and then I was like, what the fuck? And they came up at me. There was a group of these douchebags, and I just told them to go fuck themselves. My friend's like, let's get in the car and leave. Some more came. I said the same thing, and we got the fuck out of there. Like, fuck these guys.
You embody that culture. Good Lord.
Yeah,
so,
Kev, I have a face you just want to punch.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to argue with that. So, Kev, I think the first place you mentioned outside of England was Turkey. Is that the right order? So what brought you to Turkey?
Well, I got this teaching qualification, and I was looking for jobs, and there was a job going in Turkey in a place that was like, I think it was like 3 or 4 kilometers, which is about 2 miles from like one of the top 5 beaches in the world. And I was like, that could be appealing. So I applied for the job and went through the whole process. I had an interview and stuff on Skype. There were some things that seemed like sketchy about it, but I contacted the UK government, and like everything, they said like, yeah, that's all exactly as it should be, all above board. So I took the job, quit my other job, took redundancy, and then booked my flight and just went at the end of May 2011. And it turned out when I got there that it was less than above board. So basically I did my 3 months initial work there as like a probationary period, I guess, in this really nice school. And the funniest thing about this is that the school was like a $10 million campus. So it was amazing. It had like this amazing swimming pool, basketball courts, like AstroTurf football stuff, like amazing technology for teaching in every classroom, all air conditioned, which thank God, because it's really hot. And then when I came to that 3 months, I was like, so about changing my tourist visa to a working visa, because that's how it works. You have to do like a period, and then like once you're in the system, boom, done. And the boss just said to me, like completely straight out, like no trying to hide it. He said, look, it's much cheaper for us to bribe the police than it is to pay for your visa. And I was like, I see. And if I get sick, if I like have to go to hospital, he's like, Kev, come on, you're 31, you're very fit. It's not going to happen. You're going to be fine. And I was like, that's really like less than fine. So so I was there 3 more months and then got the hell out. And that's how I ended up in Poland. But yeah, I have a great love for Turkey. Like, yeah, really nice place. Obviously, a lot of problems there right now with kind of semi-dictatorship. But what can you do?
So contrast that to Poland. How did you like living there?
Loved it. Everything was above board from the moment I arrived, like everything proper and official. The schools I went to in Poland were training schools, which kind of specialize in taking people who've recently qualified and then like getting them from that point where you can survive in a classroom to like kind of really doing a good job and adding more value to the students. So that was a really, really good experience for me. I really liked it. Even the winters, like where like the winter it can get to like in Celsius, get to like minus 35. Minus 36, something like that, which is like really cold. It's kind of like the cold where you walk out of the house and, you know, like your nose starts running and then like within less than a second, it has frozen into like sort of globules of snot ice, which is kind of interesting.
That's nice.
Exactly. That's the very stuff. Absolutely. And then, but the reason I ended up leaving Poland after 3 years was that like their currency is not the euro. So their currency is like what we'd call a soft currency. So like in Poland, I was earning enough money to like go out to dinner twice a week with my friends, go out drinking at the weekend, like buy myself nice stuff. And then if I went like 5 hours west to Germany, I could spend a month's salary in 2 days, which was not ideal. So I needed to get into a country with hard currency, and that's where I went to Portugal.
Did you meet your wife in Portugal?
I did indeed, yes. After about a year of living there, met her and was like, aha, this is the one. Like, and it really was like, it's a bit ridiculous actually, and a bit kind of like a bad romantic comedy film. But we actually like talked about like the possibility of like marriage and stuff on the 3rd date, which is madness. And I'd had a lot of long-term relationships, so I wasn't just like desperately hunting for anything I could get hold of. It was just so obviously different and so obviously much more positive than other relationships that immediately. So I was like, okay, sold, done.
I mean, within 2 weeks of dating my wife, I wanted to tell her I loved her. You just know. When you know, you know.
That's it, man. That's it. Exactly that. Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk about Portugal, man. What is it about that country that feels like home?
I think like they have a very deep understanding of like culture, I guess, like music, food, art, soul, poetry. This kind of stuff is like very present in the day to day, which I think is really, really nice.
Yeah.
Like Lisbon area where I live, which is around the capital. I don't live exactly in the capital. I'm about 15 minutes outside now. But the capital has like a type of music called fado, which like it's like Fado. And this is kind of all about this emotion, which we don't really have a translation for in English, which is called saudade, which is like longing for something you don't have. And so it's kind of very melancholy. It's very emotive. And like that spoke to me like really straight away. Like when I heard it, I was just like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
I'm going to jump in real quick, man.
Go ahead.
I actually, in my master's degree, I studied and did a project on fado.
Oh, wow.
Amalia Rodriguez is, oh my gosh, like
something else.
Even something else. If you don't have an understanding of the soul and the heart that gets poured into that music, you don't need to listen to a lot of her music to gain that base understanding of it. And it is something that is not super well known outside of that area of the world, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you can listen to like all the time on repeat. I think you'd go crazy. But like at the right moment, like it's something really spectacular. So yeah, absolutely. If you're ever over that way, then let me know. I'll take you to the Fado Museum.
If I am.
That sounds pretty neat. You know what? It's not music, but it's art. For my 30th birthday, there's a narrow window when Americans were allowed to go into Cuba, specifically through a cruise. And my wife brought me to Cuba. We went to a few other areas down there, but the art. We went to Havana. It was gorgeous, but a lot of it was impoverished, so it was super heartbreaking. And
sure.
also, it induced my anxiety at one point. We're in this flea market, and everyone's trying to get you to buy their shit. But there was this one area, I don't remember his name, but it was a super famous artist, and he had this whole building. It was his art style, and it's just it was throughout the city, and it was different. It was really neat, and you were just like transcended into a Wizard of Oz, or I mean, an Oz, or you know, a
Just a
different
completely
place,
different world almost. Yeah.
like a Wonderland or something almost trippy. Like you're like, when did I get high?
Wow.
So I'm curious, with all these countries, all these experiences, how's that affected your writing? Because certainly, I'm sure it's affected your point of view of life in general.
I think that's a really good question, and I think it definitely ties into like what I want to write. And I think also like one of the things I really like when I travel, because not just places that I've lived, but I guess more so in places that I live because the opportunities are so much greater. But I really like being able to talk to people and say, who's the local hero, like from myth, or what monsters live in your forest, that kind of stuff. I think those questions are just always really interesting, and I think they tell you a lot as well about like what's going on in that culture, in some sense, or what has gone on indeed in the past, perhaps. And so, yeah, I try to bring those things in. I mean, like The Balance, my first novella, was set in Poland, and that came about through a really deep understanding of like what it was to live in the Cold War, which I got through just talking to people who'd been there and done it, who'd like queued up for sugar when they were like 5 years old, this kind of stuff, or 6 years old, or whatever the age is when you start. And going out to the wilderness in that country is just quite different to like the UK, like and same in Portugal actually, because like in the UK there really isn't that much in the way of wilderness. Like maybe if you go to Wales or if you go to Scotland, there are some places where it's wild, but certainly England, where I've spent most of my life, like it's so built up. There's so much residential and kind of commercial property there that like you almost sort of entering one place before you leave the last. And so getting an idea of like what real wilderness feels like, a wild place where you kind of like going, yeah, I'm not the top dog here as a human, like I need to be respectful, is like a really interesting perspective to have had. And I guess you guys understand that a lot better coming from the US, where there is so much more in the way of wild places.
Well, yeah, you know what? That's really neat. Also, I love that question. What monsters live in your forest? That's such a cool question. Um, all right, so Brennan and I are from Massachusetts, and let's see, West Massachusetts. Even in our areas, there's certain places where there's decent dense woods, but for really deep woods, I mean, you got West Massachusetts, the west side of Massachusetts. That's the joke, at least amongst my circle of friends growing up, was you got Boston, Salem, Plymouth, and then you got uh, uncharted territory, which was the west part of that state, because it's like there's mountain lines and shit.
Wow.
Vermont, my friend has a place it's called East Corinth or Corinth. I forget exactly how you pronounce it, but it's where they shot a lot of Beetlejuice, and it's just a lot of greenery, a lot of woods. But then you want to talk about some other type of woods, you go to Maine or New Hampshire. Yeah, man, you're you are not the top of the food chain.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It gives you a totally different perspective, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brennan, why don't you go ahead, sir?
Yeah, I want to talk about The Balance, and as soon as Pat asked that last question, I knew that was probably going to lead us there. It certainly reads like the type of novella that you could not write living in the city in England. So I'm curious. I'm very interested in Baba Yaga as a character, and most of my knowledge comes from Baba Yaga makes a lot of appearances in the Hellboy comics. I think they're the newer Hellboy movie, which I couldn't bring myself to see. She's a focal point. I'm wondering how the locals treat that lore. Is it a campfire story? Is it more?
Yeah, I mean, I think like certainly when I was in Poland, I had some friends of mine give me books, like children's books from their own childhoods to read, like when I was learning language, because children's books are a great way to get lots of new vocabulary quite quickly, but also most of it is like kind of tangible stuff that you might use day to day. So it was a really nice way for me to do it. I would like translate that into English, give it back to them, and they would go like, no, you've got completely the wrong idea here. This guy actually kills this guy. And I'd be like, damn it. But yeah, eventually kind of got there. And in one of these books that I got, it was just pure sort of Slavic folk myths that were from around that region of Europe. So like Poland, Belarus, Lithuania, Ukraine, those kind of places. Just lots of myths from that kind of Slavic region of Europe, sort of condensed together and told in sort of Polish for kids, as it were. And so what I found really interesting in that book was that there were two stories involving Baba Yaga. Everyone else, there was, all the other mythic characters had just one story. She had two. And in one of them, it was the kind of classic trope of like dark witch waiting in the forest. And it had the whole chicken leg house. It had the, cauldron bubbling with, mysterious goop that you probably don't want to drink. And then she encountered a girl who had been immoral in inverted commas, and like it didn't end well for her. But what I found really intriguing was the other story of Baba Yaga that I read, which was basically where she was like amoral, almost like sort of morally ambiguous, like not sort of like the bad guy or the good guy, but instead was literally just this thing that did what had to be done. Did what had to be done. That's correct. Yeah, did what had to be done in order to like balance the role of humanity and nature. And just this immediately like grabbed my attention and fascinated me, and kind of went down as something I would come back to. And so yeah, that's very much where the balance came from.
Now, I have a question, and I'm not 100% sure that it doesn't go into spoiler territory. So I'm going to ask you for a synopsis, quick elevator pitch, real quick.
Okay, so basically, the balance begins with a young girl called Natalia, who has been out watching her brother, but not watching closely enough. He breaks his leg. He needs treatment, and because it's the Cold War, there are no antibiotics in their tiny village. So she seeks out Baba Yaga for help, but that is just the beginning of a spiral of bad things that happen.
All right. So you didn't cover my question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Sorry. And if you consider it, no, that's okay. If you consider it a spoiler, we can ditch it. Sure. I was very interested, and again, my knowledge of this, folkloric character is very limited, but I was very interested in Baba Yaga as a mantle as opposed to a singular person. And, you mentioned there were different, in this folklore book, in this children's folklore book, there were different tales revolving around her. Is that something you came across or something that you brought to it?
I'll give you another example, actually, which comes from real life. And this is like a bonkers example. I have a friend of mine who's Ukrainian. And when she was a kid, she had, I can't remember if it was nightmares or something that was kind of to a level where it was out of hand. It was like something that was like really causing her problems. I believe it was nightmares. And she was like under 10, like 8 or 9 years old. And after sort of, her parents like trying various sort of home remedies and this kind of stuff, they literally said to her, okay, we're going to go to see Baba Yaga. And there was a woman at the edge of the forest who was that role. And she did this thing, which like, this thing sounds absolutely mental. She put like a bucket over her head and then like did some like chanting thing and like poured some blessed water with stuff in it, like over the bucket. So it didn't go on her head, but it like kind of splashed over the bucket. And like weirdly, her nightmares did stop. But, she's like reasonably skeptical about whether like this was the solution or whether it was just something that she was going to, wear off anyway. But yeah, so that there are people, or certainly there were people within my lifetime who have taken on, who are called this title and treated as kind of like, a guide in these kinds of cultures, especially in the rural areas.
What's your theory on it? Do you think she was real, or do you think it was coincidence, all in her head, that was basically a what's that called, a fake pill that you think
placebo.
were? Yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I kind of have I have a difficult relationship with like supernatural things, like because I've seen some stuff in my time that I can't really explain, but at the same time I'm like stone cold atheist. like believe that when I'm dead, I am like worm food, and what's the word, like atomized and annihilated. But I do think like certainly there are some things like natural remedies and things that are becoming more recognized by modern medicine, for example, as having like effects on people. So I think the world has kind of gone from like everything is soothsaying and like drink this disgusting plant mixture and you'll be fine, to like 100% science and drugs and chemicals. And now it's kind of going, actually science and drugs and chemicals are a really, really good basis for everything, but you can actually use this stuff as well to help with certain things. So yeah. So but I mean that ritual sounded bonkers, and I'm sure had no bloody connection to her stopping having nightmares.
Yeah, that was the version of, hey, you wrote a ghost story. Do you believe in ghosts? So sorry to take you down that path.
No, it's a good one.
Hey, what are you saying, man? I'm a total professional. You hooligan. Audio listeners, so, Brennan's giving me the finger. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, now I have to do it, or otherwise I'm, going to be deemed a liar. So, when I read this book, it very much, and I think it's down to, the main character being a younger girl, as you talked about, and of course her little brother being a very focal point as focal character as well. It had this air of fairy tale, and I have to imagine that's something that you were going for. There are a million ways to write that story, and not every one of them has to kind of read as this, almost campfire tale to be passed down. So, I mean, big question, but, talk a little bit about writing it with the idea of fairy tales and how fairy tales play into your writing.
Yeah, I think fairy tales, like I said, folklore for me is like something I'm really fascinated by wherever I go. And so because of that, like it being a fairy tale just felt natural to me in that it was based around folklore. And I think as well, like, thinking about readers, and I don't tend to think about readers too much when I'm writing, but I tend to think more about me as a reader, like my ideal reader, i.e. me. I was thinking about like one of the main characters of that book for me is the setting. It is this place that is isolated, and like one of the themes that kind of comes around through the book as well is like it starts in this winter that was something that really shocked me when I experienced that for myself for the first time, having come from a relatively temperate kind of climate. And then as the book progresses and the story kind of develops, also like nature kind of comes back to life in some sense. So I felt that was very intrinsic to that fairy tale element as well. So yeah, I mean, that was very much the approach. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read my collection, because I know you guys like interview a lot of people, have to read a lot of books. But like in the collection, there's a story called The Solstice, which is based around, very much again, absolutely fairy tale setting, based in this time in the north of Portugal on a still extant sort of folk practice that happens around the winter solstice, and going very much for the same vibe. So yeah, that will continue to be a feature of what I write.
Why don't you plug your collection, man? Tell us the title, who it's out by, if it's self-published, and so forth.
It's called Paths Best Left Untrodden, and I put it out myself, but under Dan Howarth's press label, which is Northern Republic. So far, there's only his collection and my collection available there, but I hope they're both good examples of decent work. And the stories in there range from about 2017, which is when I first started taking writing really seriously, up until I think like mid to late 2020. So it's a fair slice of like what I do. And I think I tried deliberately, like I dropped quite a few stories that I originally was going to put in because I wanted to have like a variety to showcase sort of different, hopefully, strengths of my like writing catalog, I suppose. So yeah, there's a bit of sci-fi, there's a bit of dystopian, there's some folkloric stuff, and so on.
That's a good segue, actually. Dan Howarth, for those that listen to This Is Howard. This is Howarth. That ain't even a blooper. I'm just keeping it in here. This is Howard, the podcast with Michael David Wilson, now Bob Pastorella. Dan was one of the first 3 original hosts. It was 3 people. I forget who the third one was.
John Costello. John Costello? I think it's John Costello.
I don't remember, man. I've only listened to a few of the first season. He said he doesn't have seasons. Whatever. The first few episodes. I don't know what you call them. Dan Howarth was one of the first before Bob Pastorella took over like 100 episodes later. Why don't you tell us about Dan, man? Let's bug him.
Yeah, Dan's a really good writer. I'm actually reading a book of his at the moment as a beta read, and I just read 1 chapter because I only got it like last week. I read it on the way into London, and holy shit, this book is going to be something if it continues this way. I mean, his collection I think is really, really good. One of the things I think is really amazing about Dan's work is that quite often you'll kind of read a story and you'll think, I think this is going here, but it can't go there because that's much too horrible. And then he's like, no, I am absolutely going there. And and it's not like horrible through sort of graphic, gory descriptions like extreme horror. It's just places where you're just like, I don't want my mind to go down this particular path. And thank you for taking me there, you complete bastard. So yeah, like there's one story he did which was performed wonderfully on The Other Stories, which is a podcast from a group called Hawk and Cleaver, who we've both had quite a few stories with, called Collaboration. And it was just about like an experimental artist who has lost their mind, and they collaborate with some people, maybe kind of against their will. It's only about 2,000 words. I really recommend reading it. His collection is called Dark Missives. It's got a really cool Luke Spooner cover. But yeah, again, I really recommend it. I think every story in that is like superb. So I really recommend people picking that up.
I like Luke's art. Let's go back to Dan's book. Can we know what the title is so we can know what to look for?
Yes, Dark Missives. So that's the title. Yeah, it's an unusual title, but it's because there's one story in there about like a delivery driver, and that's kind of the focal point of the cover, with some stuff spilling out of the van that relates to some of the other stories. It's really cleverly devised, actually. The cover, as you said, Luke's like brilliant. So Dan went to him and said, I have an idea, and Luke went, do you mean this? And he was like, well, no, I meant something far inferior to this, but I will take it. Thank you.
Brian, maybe you know, Kev, maybe you know the answer, but didn't he do the cover work for Andy Cole's Remains?
He did.
That was
I believe so. Yeah.
What a great fucking book, man.
Yeah.
I
absolutely loved it.
I read that like a year or two ago, and I still like, it still gets under my skin, man. Anytime you're dealing with a kid in an unfavorable situation, I'll leave it at that. I mean,
I think the emotional punch of that book was, same. I read it 2 years ago. I won it in a giveaway. Hurrah!
Nice.
And I read it like over about a day, I guess, like one sitting, maybe 2 sittings in the same day. And the grief gut punch, which just keeps on coming, is brutal.
And even when you show the very end of what happened with what led to all this, it just still fucks with my head.
Yeah, 100%.
Before I even was a dad, I read it. And now that I'm a dad, it fucks with my head even more. So yeah. So let's talk about This Is Horror. You're a staff writer for them. How'd you hook up with those guys to be a writer on that site?
Well, weirdly enough, actually, I've known Michael since about 2007. So Michael Wilson. So we had mutual friends around the Midlands of the UK about the same time through listening to heavy metal music, really, and just hanging out with a bunch of guys that were in bands and stuff. And so he always knew that I was interested in creative pursuits because I was in a band. I was a screamer. I used to write lyrics for the bands that I was in. And we met up that way. And then when I started sort of thinking about writing more seriously, and especially getting into like indie horror, the person who was doing the news and must-read horror segments on This Is Horror every week had to step down because he had like some family commitments. And he was like, do you want to do it? And it's actually been, the thing that I've really loved about that experience is that I have been exposed to writers that I probably never would have found without a huge amount of digging, but they actually come to me now and say, hey, there's this new novella out, and I'm like, oh, look at that cover, I must read that. And just encounter so many more creatives through that experience. So it's been really, really positive for me.
You know what, I felt that way when Brent and I were with Deadhead Reviews before they died, and I feel like that with this podcast too. It's pretty cool. It's like you put out a light, and it just draws in, not always, but a lot of the people that you would never know of, but you are glad you do.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk about how you were on their podcast. That episode hasn't aired yet, I don't think. I didn't see it come up.
No, it's, I think there's like 2 more in between, maybe something like that, like before it comes.
So whatever you're comfortable with telling us, if anything, how'd that go? Was that your first time on that show?
Yeah, it was my first time talking to those guys in that way. It's really funny because I know Bob and Michael like reasonably well from like working with them for the last like 4 or 5 years,
Right.
and Michael for much longer. But I think it was good. I mean, I think like this show, I think it tends to be a kind of a fluid conversation rather than being like just questions. And I definitely think there is a place in the world for just questions as well. Like I think just Q&A interviews are really useful too. But I think that natural conversational approach like often leads conversations to some interesting places and often means that people are getting more out of it than necessarily just a plug for a book or just like writing advice or whatever. You know, it can kind of transcend that kind of format in some sense.
Oh, we love that show. I'll speak for Brennan here. We've talked about it a lot privately and public on the show. That's that we view that, and at the time Brian Keane's show, as like the 2 best podcasts out there. And yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. That's specifically what we intended on doing. To get to, because for me, when I started listening to podcasts, I got to know the person behind the art, and if I found the person interesting, I'm like, I want to know what they create.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I mean, someone listening to this, our goal and hopes are, you know, who's Kev Harrison? Let's find out. Oh, he's got a pretty interesting life. You do, man. You've been in some pretty neat countries. We haven't talked to anyone that's been to Turkey before, or even Portugal or Portland, to my knowledge. So that's really interesting. Brennan, you got any questions? I don't know, good segue. So you got any different questions?
Yeah, I'm actually still stuck on, I'm imagining you coming out in front of a metal band or a punk band and just very politely and, cheerily greeting the audience and then launching into these Cookie Monster growls. So I'd like to know a little bit about your music history.
Well, I started off in a band when I was about 14, 15, like some really good friends of mine in high school. High school in the UK is like sort of secondary. It runs from like sort of 11, 12 to 16 or 18, depending when you leave. And I had some really good friends, and we kind of got together through our love of like rock and metal music. And then, it kind of became quite natural for some of them to sort of pick up instruments. I was really not the one for that because I have no musical talent at all. But I can make a really scary noise. And if you met my mother, you'd know why. So that was my line. And also because I'd always done like sort of a lot of narrative writing, like I took to writing lyrics quite a lot. And like the lyrics in the songs I wrote tended to be quite narrative based. And again, like things like folklore came in, things like sort of supernatural entities, that kind of stuff, just things that have always interested me came into that. And so that was the focus of those lyrics. And yeah, we gigged a lot. Like we gigged, I must have done easily 200 gigs with my first band Desolation, and then I joined another band called Ruins of Amber when I left Desolation because I was too far away, with some other friends of mine, and had a really good time with them as well. Lots of touring, a couple of demo CDs cut, that kind of stuff. Yeah, really, really good fun.
That's awesome.
Now, horror and that type of loud in-your-face music definitely go hand in hand. So, if we have any vocalists or aspiring vocalists listening, because I was in your position at one point, I ended up singing for a band in addition to playing bass because nobody else wanted to. Actually, how I ended up on bass as well. We had 3 guitars and no bassist, so I drew the short straw. But I'm curious, how did you what routines did you take to avoid losing your voice while making scary noises?
I think warming up is really important. Like it's funny because I run now as well, and like I'm really conscious of like the fact that when I was younger, perhaps I wouldn't have taken like advice to like warm up before screaming, before running, whatever. But like as you get older, your body less and less forgives you for that stuff. So like I definitely think like after some time I started to take that warming up stuff more seriously, especially if we had if you had like a period of 11 days with 7 shows, and if you don't warm up on the first 3, then by the time show 4 comes around, it's like you're not playing, son. So so yeah, that became really important. So I think that's the big thing. Just like warm up sensibly, lots of fluids, not just beer, and yeah, it makes a big difference. Oh, and stay away from dairy. Dairy is terrible because it like increases mucus production. Yeah, exactly, man, exactly.
I'm getting my tonsils out tomorrow, and that was advised that don't eat ice cream because you don't want to produce phlegm or whatever. You know what, man? There's a lot. I feel like I would have been in your group of friends because specifically, like, I love rock. My dad grew me up on like vinyl rock albums from the 70s. They were always as close to 100%. I can say this: either American or English-based, England-based bands. My favorite band's Led Zeppelin. I also love The Who. For heavy metal, you know, you got Askin Alexandria and this band called The Architects. And then Sweden's got a lot of killer bands. One of my other favorite bands is In Flames. I mean, something about Europe where you guys produce a shitload of talent.
Well, that place in Sweden where In Flames are from, Gothenburg, there was this whole, in the 90s, the Gothenburg sound was like the thing in metal, really, especially in like technical melodic death metal, which is what we were aiming to play. So
I
like
love
bands
that
like
stuff, man. Melodic metal.
In Flames, Dark Tranquillity, At the Gates, all these kind of bands were like on regular rotation. Dissection as well. Just couldn't get enough of that stuff.
What's that one I'm thinking of? Something Warhammer? No, not Warhammer.
Oh god.
Something Hammer. And also how the hell? Oh, Hammerfall. That's it.
Hammerfall.
How to forget the godfather of metal, Ozzy Osbourne. I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's working on a new album.
I don't know how he's not dead. I mean, like, how is he not dead?
I brought my brother for his birthday. Got me and him. I think it was the 40th anniversary of Quadrophenia for The Who, and we saw them in Boston back in like 2013. And it was Roger Daltrey singing, Pete Townshend, and then the drummer was Ringo Starr's kid, Zach, whatever their last name is. But I'm just listening to them, man, and I've listened to almost all their albums. There's some that I haven't heard, some of the studio albums I haven't heard, but I'm just thinking, like, this guy, he's like 70-something, and the album came out when he was, I don't know, his 30s, and I think he sounds just as good. It's, how the hell do you do that at that age?
Yeah. Maintaining your voice, maintaining fitness as well, just to be like on the road and just not giving up the ghost. I mean, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I don't sleep in my own bed, I mean, I'm 42 this year, and like, you know, it's a really different thing nowadays. Like the things I used to put my body through and just like wake up and feel fresh as a daisy. Now I wake up and I'm just like, the pain, death is stalking me at every turn.
Yeah. I mean, like, I went down the stairs by myself for 2 days, and it was fun. I had a blast, but like, I came back here and I missed my son, and that was the first time I haven't spent a day with my boy in the almost 2 years he's been here, and I miss my wife. But thing about being on tour internationally, you got to be built for that kind of lifestyle. Definitely. And then one more thing about when you're younger, I was in my 20s when I was a merchandiser for this company called Polar Beverages. They're big in the East Coast. It's just seltzer water, soda, and whatnot. I would get hammered the night before. I'd still be hungover while I was working, just sweat it out. I'd be fine in my 20s. Yeah. If I do that now, I'd be like, oh, fuck this. I don't want to go to work.
Exactly.
So writing lyrics versus prose, all three of us have done it, both. I'm curious to pick your brain, Kev, and I actually want to hear your thoughts on it too there, Brennan. What is it about writing lyrics that spoke to you, and what are some really noticeable differences that you got to adjust your styles from lyrics to prose that you've really taken away after doing both?
Wow. Well, I think like I grew up doing quite a lot of poetry when I was a teenager, so I think that kind of lent itself quite well to lyrics anyway. I think with like moving from lyrics to prose, like I said, I think lyrically I tended to write stuff that was quite narrative focused anyway, so I think that was like useful. And the other thing that I brought over from lyrics that I used quite a bit in my prose is alliteration. So like when you have like the same sound at the beginning of like several words like either in a row or like in the same sentence to kind of get like some sort of rhythmic elements to it. So I suppose that's the biggest thing I take over. A lot of the other stuff from writing lyrics you kind of have to chop away, because like unless you're writing poetry, like having stuff in meter, you know, unless you want to be like emulating like Virgil in the Roman Empire or something, it's just not really applicable to day-to-day prose writing. What about you, Brendan? What do you reckon?
You know what? I was thinking about that the whole time you were going, and I one big thing I echo is the poetry. I had a teacher in college basically say, if you want to learn how to, even if you think you don't like it, if you want to learn how to write lyrics, you've got to divulge yourself in poetry. I remember there was one that I picked up that Octavio Paz, a Spanish poet, that I got a lot of, even with the English translations, you get a lot of rhythm out of that, and you learn how to kind of adhere to within a certain form. But as far as comparing prose and lyrics, that's a tough one for me, because I'm, newer to writing prose, and it's been a long time since I played in a band and wrote lyrics. So it's very difficult to compare the two when you've worked on them in such different stages of your life. So I'll leave that to the experts.
Makes sense.
That's fair. For me, when I wrote lyrics, basically me and my one bandmate at the time were just trying to punch the listener as hard as we could with powerful imagery in a short amount of lines, because you only got so many lines in one song, and it's really that, it's the instrumental side too that'll take your fans away. So to compare that to prose, it comes down to lean storytelling, narration, pacing. I'm still working really hard on that to become better at those mechanics. So I'm by far no expert, but that was my take. They're both fun, and I totally dig the whole poetry thing. I think there should be poetry in prose too. Really diving into Peter Straub has taught me that you can write. It doesn't even have to be graphic, like extreme gore or whatever, but you can write the most horrific scene. But if you write it with like your soul, to me, that's poetry.
I think that's a really fair comment. Yeah, absolutely.
Brennan, you want to take us away in a new direction, bud?
Yeah, let's jump into. We've been doing this for almost an hour, and we have barely talked about Below, so let's go there. Cool. Now, my first question was, and kind of still is to a degree, what was your inspiration for this? But you mentioned earlier the rats and claustrophobia, and I wonder, in addition to whatever other inspiration, did that play into it?
Yes, certainly. Like, that is the one feeling that kind of stayed with me from reading that book at such a young age. It was something that I remember feeling that was just unpleasant. Also, when I was in Poland, I had a one-to-one student who was quite a big cheese in a big mining company, and he actually one day invited me to go to a huge coal mine in the next province over, basically from where I was in Poland, and that was a really eye-opening experience, because the heat, I had no idea about that at all till I went there. Like, the fact that the temperature goes up as you go down, like, that didn't make any sense to me, because I'd been to a few caves, but like generally they sat kind of at room temperature because they were kind of at ground level. So to go down there and feel that heat and that humidity was really, really surprising. And also, like, yes, claustrophobia, but also like a kind of darkness, like, that I had not experienced before, because like imagine you have like these floodlights all over the whole thing, because it's like a modern mine, right? It's not like these crappy old ones, where like just people are dying left, right, and center. They want to keep people alive. So there's lights everywhere, but like the best way I could describe it is like the light kind of attempts to eat into the darkness and doesn't get very far. It's just so weird. Like, light just kind of dies, like, because the dark is so oppressive. And it was just such a bizarre experience, like having like a head torch and like going, this is like, brutal, like powerful halogen, like, don't stare at my face because I won't be able to see shit. And then like you put it down the tunnel and it's like, yeah, it's gone in like 3-4 feet, it's gone, because it's just so dark. So this this was an experience that this was my first year in Poland. Actually, it's like 2012, 2013, and that really stuck with me as like an experience like that. I thought, yeah, one day that's gonna come out of the toolkit.
I want to, before we go back to the story, I want to talk about that cover. That looks like a film cover. I imagine Keelan did that on purpose, but can you tell us what, because based off of hearing Brennan's process with Silver Shamrock and how you go about a cover, you basically give an idea of what the book's about and he comes up with something. So can you tell us your process with the cover?
Yeah, so I think it was quite similar to what Brennan's described on the show previously. Like, they give you like a PDF with an example of someone else's book and say, this is what we've done with this book. This is how it kind of came about. Give me some ideas. So I gave him the like sort of three central characters, I suppose. Like there's one, I guess there's one or two protagonists, then like one extra central character who's quite important as well. So I told him what they were about, where they're from, what they look like, etc. Told him about the antagonist, and then sort of said, like, you know, it's in an old gold mine. Like, there's a lantern, which could be an interesting focus. But I mean, I didn't have a bloody clue. Like, visual arts wise, like, I am so hopeless. Like, I'm the kind of guy that, like, you know, in my class, I'm trying to describe something to my students. I like draw a dog, and they're like, "Why is there a horse on the board?" And I'm like, "Fuck you guys! This is the best I can do." So I really had no clue. And then like I'd done the final edits with Kenneth Kane and sent it back to him, and he was like, "Yeah, cool, done, fine. Here's a proof." And then the next morning I woke up to go to work, and this is my uni job in the UK where I'm working really early in the morning, so I'm just like, you know, like brain dead. And there's this email from Ken McKinley, and it just says like, "What do you think of this idea?" And I was like, what? Like, how did he do this from my like bullshit? Basically, my bullshit is like, it's dark, a bit dark. There's some dirty walls. I don't know. And then he's just like, "Here is the best cover of 2021. Is that okay?" And I'm like, "That will be fine, thank you." Yeah, I just don't know how the guy does it. I mean, he's just like and like how he continues to do it. Because I mean, if you look at like the covers he was producing like 5-6 years ago, all amazing, and now he's, without repeating himself, all amazing in 2021. It's just like something else.
Well, we mentioned earlier that you know, they put out 2 books a month, and you know, there's very few misses, and the covers are the exact same way. Every, you know, there are certainly yours is a standout. It really is, but none of the other ones are slacking either.
Find me a bad cover by Keelan. I don't think you can. Like, I don't think it's possible. Yeah. Or even a mediocre cover.
Even his, I'm struggling to word this, and I'm just gonna say whatever's coming to my head. Even his not so great ones, they're still really good.
That's it, exactly. Like, there's not one mediocre one. It's like, oh, this one is only 7.5 out of 10. Well, shame on you.
So I just wanted to throw this out there. When we've talked to you for a while, Kev, about coming on, and I always just thought it was, I don't even know if I voiced this to Brennan. I always thought it was really neat. I'm like, we got at least a listener in Portugal. That's fucking cool. You were, to my knowledge, one of the first. Some people steer clear of this because it seems egotistical. I don't mean it like that, but I would think it's safe to call you a fan of the show. And
yeah, I listen pretty much every week, like, so yeah.
I mean, I tell Michael David Wilson often how much I love his show. I consider myself a fan of that, but you were one of the first where we're like, he's an author. He listens to the show. It felt cool, and I don't think I ever told you that. So that's why I waited till now, but it meant a lot, and you have never left my mind for having this talk one day. So
appreciate
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one element or layer of what fuels me to continue. So it's kind of like
I think, sorry to interrupt. I think, like I said, with This Is Horror, like, you're kind of getting, like, I definitely get writing advice out of this show, and like, you know, listening to the Peter Straub episode the other day. I mean, he's just like dropping like bombs of gold all over the show. But I mean, some of the conversations you have, you know, like the writing advice is a bit thin on the ground, but then there's always something else, you know, whether that's like, you know, just how to live your life as a good human being from some of the people you've had, or like, you know, struggles people have had that I don't understand, or I maybe have never thought about. and just like being able to digest those and like just take different perspectives on the world. I mean, I sign me up for that shit every day of the week, you know.
Thank you. Me and Ken McKinley, like I said off here, we were talking yesterday for a while, just shooting the shit, talking the craft and whatnot, and we were talking about like just how you can find when you dig to the core of anyone, even if you really don't like someone or they don't like you, put all the emotion bullshit aside, you can find common ground somewhere, even if it's as superficial as like, and that might not even be the right word, but I like this sports team, or we both like seafood. What do you like about it? And then you could, if you put bullshit aside, you could have a good conversation with someone.
100%. Yeah.
That's what this show's taught me. Like, just listening, you talk about your experience. That's what I love as a person, and it makes me want to read more of your books.
Thanks,
yeah, so for Below, I'm going to dive back into that because my favorite thing about that, am I allowed to talk about...
Whatever, go for it.
Tell me to cut this out if I give away anything.
Sure.
Am I allowed to talk about anything dealing with the grandfather?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll just leave it very vague. What he ends up being, what Nicholas discovers him to become. I can see Kenneth Kane and McKinley were talking about they're talking about the types of books that they deal with. Oh, and this is a fun fact for anyone that likes Silver Shamrock books is I didn't know this until I met Kenneth Kane's wife in person, but she reads every single book. She's a proofreader. I didn't know that. So she's one of the big gears in the behind the scenes side of Silver Shamrock.
And she catches stuff even that Kenneth misses, you know, because like Kenneth Kane, I mean, his eye is like, you know, like he's like got that thing from the Terminator where he just like scans it and it can just like it flashes red, I think. But I mean, she catches stuff even that he misses. So, you know, yeah, definitely she is a key individual in that process.
I never knew that until they were just talking about it. But they were talking about, they're like, oh, well, Kenneth Kane really loves talking about like how certain things come back and how he likes how certain themes aren't discussed, and then, you know, everything's cyclical. But one of them, they mentioned what the grandfather in your story is, and they're like, oh, we got this one now with Kev Harrison's book. I'm like, wait, what is it? Oh, shit, that's in my Kindle. So I got really excited. Then I read about it. That monster is my favorite part of the whole book because he's so creepy, man. And you just like, at least part of me when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I hope that he's like going to do something nice. Or it turns out that he's just like really confused because he's been locked in a cave for decades. But you got me, man. He's so fucking creepy. Brendan, what are your thoughts on the grandfather?
I thought that was brilliantly done. And the lead up to it with the I guess the drop-ins of epistolary format. So I mean, it's kind of that idea of, you know, something's lurking in the dark, you know, because of the genre you've picked a book up in and the fact that it's underground. No offense, man, but if there wasn't something lurking in the dark, I would have been disappointed. It's just it's almost like an unwritten promise. And the way that the monster stays off screen but remains a focal point for a fair portion of the book, that's how you do it. Whether you're, you know, whether you're reading or whether you're watching a movie, it's going to make the payoff mean a whole lot more when the payoff comes.
Yeah, I can't remember who I was listening to on This Is Horror a while ago, actually. And I think it was actually when we were speaking to Shane Hawke on Ross Jeffrey's YouTube channel. And he said this thing that I thought was really, really accurate, which is like, as soon as you see the, let's say, werewolf, because he was talking about a werewolf in this case, as soon as a werewolf appears in front of you, you know, your decisions become like, okay, do I have a weapon? Can I run? You know, can I distract it? Whatever. Like, it becomes like sort of this, you know, like regular decision making thing. Whereas when you don't know what it is that you're facing and you just have like snippets of sensory data, that's when you're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, because you don't know what you're facing. So you can't make any of those decisions. And so that was kind of the reason I left it like that. Like, and also I tried to throw in a few like references to other things that it might be, but it isn't, at different times, to make people think, oh, maybe this is here, oh, maybe this is here, but keep people thinking like, shit, what is it? Shit, what is it?
You got me, man, because like the epistolary thing, I personally love it. Like I'm reading not reading, I'm listening to the audiobook, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein for the first time. And you know what? When epistolary style is done well, it's just like I could listen to that shit all day. It is a fine line when you can kind of make it not believable and you're just like, just get on with it. But you did not do the latter, in my opinion. You did a really good job. And I wish I wrote it down, but there were some specific moments when it made me wonder, and I paused and like, I think he did some research into like mining and what have you. Was there a lot of research involved for that aspect of the book?
Yeah, I mean, having this guy who took me down in Poland, I mean, he'd explained this stuff to me like on a number of occasions during lessons, because often he would like go, this week I have a presentation for shareholders in English and I'm shitting myself. So I'm going to give you the presentation and you tell me which bits I fuck up. And that was literally how lessons went sometimes. So a lot of the technology and stuff I was kind of familiar with, but some of it I had to like refresh. And occasionally, I think twice, I was like, hello, Mihao. Do you remember me from some time ago? I'm writing a book about monsters in mines. Please help. And he was like really gracious to like give me to say this would not happen. Or like, for example, the bit about flares. I was really unsure about having distress flares. I wanted it to be a limited number. But then I thought like maybe there could be explosive gases down there and that would ruin everything. And he said to me that like you can take flares down there depending on the size of the space. But it would always be a limited number in case one ignites another and creates an explosion because of the problems there. So that was one thing that I covered off through asking a contact, which was very helpful.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. I in my line of work, I deal with all sorts of gases, and that actually would make me wonder if if there's some kind of buildup where you can't even smell it. Some gases you can't even detect.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Plus, if you were to say no, my question would be like, how the fuck can anyone be mean to you, man?
I mean, he did get promoted, like from one of the talks he gave, which I corrected. So hopefully he felt like in some way indebted to me.
That's really cool. Those are the really neat moments, and I'd love to know with you two. Do you guys ever talk publicly to strangers, not even like in a braggadocious way, about being a writer? Because I found out that I have to be careful now because I've experienced certain people that would be like, I'm a writer, and they'll just start talking about how they never did it, and I'm just like, I don't want to hear this fucking story again. What are your? I'm sure you guys have a story. Can I hear at least one of them from the two of you?
Brendan, do you have one?
You know what? I don't, because I don't talk to anybody about it, if I'm honest. I work in 4 schools. Let's say average number of 12 teachers per school, plus aides, plus, different workers in there. So, you're looking at 50 people that I interact with in a week. And I don't have any desire to talk about that with any of them. They're lovely people, but there's a certain stigma with writing the things that the 3 of us write and also working with young children. So, as far as talking to strangers, Patrick, I learned when I was young, that's not a good idea. It's how you end up in the back of a van.
Maybe I should clarify exactly what I'm talking about so it doesn't sound like I'm a dumbass kid. For example,
hey, big guy, I'm a writer.
Yeah, he didn't say big guy, but he did say, hey, 4 eyes or something, like some dumb insult followed by let's fuck you up. Yeah, so my mother-in-law and my wife and my family were walking around this little like village type thing with shops, and there was this one section in this sold different types of foods and stuff, and there was this literally one rack of books, and I was just looking at them, and some guy was talking about how he wanted to write a book, and my mother-in-law was about to say something about me being a writer, and I'm like, don't do that shit. And I wasn't trying to be mean, but I told her after when we were out of earshot, I'm like, there's so many people that say that, but I don't want to hear about his book he'll never write. That's why I brought it up. I mean, I've heard other writers talk about that, how it's kind of an irritation. I didn't know if either one of you had a story like that.
What about
I mean,
you,
I
Kev?
sometimes
You
get
talk
it
to
from
strangers?
I sometimes get it from students, like because if I have like students who are like late teens, for example, which is like the age group I teach probably most frequently, because I tend to teach higher levels. And in Portugal, like the English level of like the average person is like really bloody high. It's quite amazing. So like I normally do tell them, because I think it's a point of interest as well. Like it kind of makes you as a teacher more human, and I think that's kind of often half the battle when you're a teacher as well. I don't know about that, your experience, Brennan. Like they kind of think that teachers live in cupboards and are kind of like robots that get switched on at 9 a.m. and get switched off again at 5. So like I try and add in like snippets of like, yes, I also am a human. I also use the bathroom. But what I find quite often as well is that students will say to me like, oh, I'm trying to write stories, or like I had a student this year who was like trying to write a film script in English. And she's like 17. And she's like, well, will you read my scripts? And I'm like, hell yes, and I try to encourage these people as much as possible, because like, I mean, to have the balls to be not just writing a film script when you're 17, but writing a film script in your second language when you're 17, I'm like, if you have mistakes in there, do not worry about it. Like, do the thing, because that is seriously impressive and seriously gutsy.
That's commendable, man. It really is. Because, like, she wants to do something. She wants to write a story. The only way you're going to learn if you want to do it, like it, and want to continue is if you do it.
Exactly.
So I got to ask, and you have to tell what the entire story was, but, like, what was it about? Did you like it? And so forth.
It was kind of like sort of literary fiction style kind of story. So not really about like not very plot driven, more sort of character driven, people with like a broken family, broken sort of life, and like trying to cope with that. Quite like I guess philosophical as well. But I mean, geez, if I think about the stuff that I wrote when I was a teenager, similar kind of thing, like very like like sort of grand ambitions, things that I think would perhaps not interest me to the same extent now, because they're just a bit too like self-indulgent, probably is the best word, I guess. But teenagers, I mean, that's the time to be self-indulgent, right?
Yeah, dude, I wish, I don't know how to do this at this point, but I really wish that we had a way to connect with teens and young adults that want to become writers, because they're literally the next generation.
Yeah.
I haven't found out the way that the like, we're on Twitter and I'm sure they are too, but I really haven't found that route yet. But I'd be very interested in learning that, man, because you have a front row seat to this, and it's just interesting to learn and to kind of watch what they think about, and it kind of helps you, paint a broader stroke with life too. A lot of people forget what they thought about when they were teenagers.
100%.
That's why being a writer is amazing. I don't think a lot of us lose that childhood approach to life, because a lot of adults, they're stuffy. They don't believe in the imaginative side, and that's kind of sad.
I think like a sense of wonder. Like if I ever lose a sense of wonder, then just take me outside and put a bullet in me. I mean, really, it's over for me at that point, right? Like, and so I try to encourage, like, sometimes, especially in the classroom with teens, you get like a teenager who is like, crazy about something, whether that's like Harry Potter or like Shadow and Bone thing that was on Netflix this year. Like, so some of my kids like absolutely went crazy for that. And then you get like the cool kid like going, "Oh, you're such a geek," and I'm like, yeah, what was the last thing like you were like touched by? Let's go and find what that is, man, because like she's not the one losing out here. You're the one losing out by not being not feeling anything, like not having wonder about anything.
I agree.
Let's face it, that if you know all your sports stats, you're inclined to call somebody geeky for being a fan of the Shadow and Bone thing or whatever. But is that really any different?
Exactly.
It's I guess on a broad level, society would deem it more acceptable, although I think that's different than it was 20 years ago. But it's I keep trying to avoid using the word obsessing, but it's obsessing over, something that interests you.
Yeah.
Like when I was growing up, it was for me Star Wars, like a lot of kids. And then when I saw the first trailer for the Fellowship of the Rings, that was my new Star Wars. For me, there's not a better trilogy, movie wise or book wise. And I want to say a few, but like, it's just so fucking good. And that's a completely different world. And I don't know, man. As long as you're not losing yourself completely, where that's all you talk and think about, it's fine. It's healthy. It's good. It's an escape. Because if you don't have that escape, the world's rough. It's stressful, and you're gonna end up going a little mad.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Yeah, I really do think so.
So I'm really curious of what we've talked about today. We've talked about a lot of horror. We've talked a lot about your storytelling, your life. Brendan's tapped into something I didn't think about before, because we talk about our guests and we often show each other notes of what we're going to discuss so we don't repeat each other. But he said something that I didn't even think about. You not only step into it, but you kind of explore elements of fairy tales and fables. Are you going to dive more head on into that in the future? Have you given that any thoughts? Because for me, as a reader and someone that knows what you're capable of writing, I'd like to specifically know a lot about like Turkish myths, because Mid-Eastern, I'm pretty sure, isn't that where all of like humanity started in that area, the Middle East?
Very close. Yeah, I mean, Eastern Turkey, you've got a place called Ararat, which was like the first ziggurats, which is like these temples that were built by Mesopotamian people like thousands of years ago. Funnily enough, and this feels like a really, really like forced segue, and I can just state here that I did not pass Patrick any money to bring up this conversation. I finished my first novel draft in March, and it is actually based in the Middle East.
Nice.
And it actually comes about from something that happened to me really when I was in Turkey. When I was in Turkey, I learned to play backgammon with a friend of mine that I made there.
What's that?
It's like a board game, a bit like chess, I suppose. A bit more chance involved because you use dice and counters, and it's really strategic and tactical. And if you go around like places in the Middle East, you will see like old fellas just sitting outside, smoking shisha pipes and drinking coffee and playing backgammon or tea sometimes. And I was like, I don't know how to play backgammon. Teach me to play backgammon. So he taught me to play backgammon. And the first time I won against this guy who had taught me, which I was like deeply proud, honoured moment, this old woman came by, like an old like sort of widow from like one of the rural communities near the place in Turkey where I lived. And basically in like the local custom of law, and also in like sort of Muslim tradition, you're supposed to give like basic foodstuffs. If you're a provider of basic foodstuffs, you're supposed to give basic foodstuffs to widows, because they're like, they haven't got a husband to provide for them. Of course nowadays that's a bit questionable, but whatever. And so she came up and asked him for an ice cream, and he was like, I'm not giving you an ice cream, because you can have like some bread, you can have some cheese, you can have some ham. No, not ham, because it's haram, but like whatever, you can have some basic stuff, but you can't have ice cream because that's like luxury and so on. And she like went crazy. And what was really interesting is she was shouting at him in Turkish, and there was this point in the middle of the conversation where she went into Arabic instead, and it's a very, very different language, like phonemically. So I could tell immediately she's speaking Arabic, because I've been to Arabic countries quite a bit before. And she was like spitting, like she was shouting so much, she was spitting in his face. Not COVID safe, but this is before COVID.
Not COVID safe. Sorry, that was really funny to me.
And my mate, who's like this big strapping lad, like massive, massive fella, lovely, but you wouldn't mess with him. He just started crying, and I was like, what is going on here? I don't speak either of these languages very well. Oh my God. And he came back and he told me basically that his this woman had like put a curse on him, put a curse of a jinn on him. Jinn is like sort of a Arabic genie. Spirit. Yeah, exactly where the genie comes from. Absolutely. And that like stuff was going to go really bad for him. And I was like, calm down. It's 2011. We're not going to believe in all that stuff, are we? And but he was really disturbed, and we went out. It was my last night in the town, basically. We went out drinking at this music bar, had a really good time. Then we came back in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, and his ice cream thing, which weighed about 2 tons and took 3 of us to move, had been unchained and moved into the middle of the road, and the morning sun had like destroyed all of his ice cream. And like, I mean, I think like probably she had like a couple of big nephews or whatever, and she was like, "Go and fuck up his ice cream," but he was completely convinced that it was a djinn. And this is the kicking off point for my story. And thankfully, the novel that I've written goes in places that didn't really happen, thank goodness. But yeah, so the next novel I'm going to tidy up in the next few weeks and then try to sell to someone is absolutely Middle Eastern folklore and around jinn.
I would, love so much to read that. So please keep me posted. I just want to go back to 2 points. You were hesitant. I understand why. But on this show, I'm not gonna look. This show could be on YouTube or whatever for a decade or longer. I don't know. I could die and the thing could still be up. So,
oh my god.
So I bring that up because I don't like to shy away from what may offend a small group of people if you're just talking about the way something is, because that's how it is. And what my point of that is, in Arabic cultures, it's my understanding, it still is, I believe, it's very patriarchal. So you were hesitant to say like the widow doesn't have a man to provide for them. I mean, like I understand the hesitancy because that's not how we are over here in the States. That's not how you guys are over there in that part of Europe. But that's how it was, at least when she was growing up, I'm sure. In that
and
part
I think
of
that's
the
a
world.
cultural reality for her age group as well. Still,
It
I mean,
is.
Like, I think like people like my age, when they get to that age, may be living a very different existence, like still working and that kind of thing. But yes, certainly for her, it was absolutely the norm.
I only bring that up because I think it's really important to know that know the history of things and not shy away from them. And I just want you and future potential guests to never feel uncomfortable talking to us about this, because I'm saying I'm okay with it. I run the show, and if someone has an issue with a guest saying that, well, they can bitch to someone else about it.
Sure.
The other point I wanted to talk about was the djinn. I only know about that because I think it was the show Supernatural that first discussed it, and then I started to really dive into Middle Eastern boogeyman, myths, and so forth. And the djinn was fascinating. It's like the genie from Aladdin, only he's evil.
Well, and jinn are like really complex. There's so many different. I mean, I've read a lot about this, obviously, because I was writing a book. And like, it's really complex. There are some that are just absolutely not evil. There are some that are really ambivalent. There are some that are really nasty, called the ghoul, which is like Ghul, which is where we get the word ghoul from. They kind of live in graveyards and are just the ones that you really don't want hanging around. And so, yeah, it's a really. I think it's a story that has not been told very much in like Western literature. I think it's on me to not do like the people of the nations I'm representing a disrespect. My protagonist is British because I feel much more qualified to ground it in that, and also then that person could be the one that is asking the stupid questions, frankly. But I mean, there's 2 other main characters, and both of them are Turkish, and thankfully I have friends from Turkey who are quite very fluent in English, who have already said, like, once you've got a finalized version, let me read it, and if there's anything that's like mega faux pas, I will let you know, like no holds barred. So that's going to be a really useful and necessary part of that process.
I think that's really important, man. You know what? I just learned something that relates specifically to that. I'm not trying to plug myself or something I'm working on, but it does relate. That's why I bring it up. But I am going to be working on this historic horror next year, because there's a lot of research involved of something really fucked up that is unsolved in the town I live in. And I went to the Historic Society building. It's literally, you could throw a rock and hit it from my house. And long story short, the workers there were very receptive. They were fine. They're like, other people have tried writing about this before, and they kind of get facts wrong, and they play it off not as fiction, and we take the blow for that. There's a lot of historians in this area that will call out all this stuff that are incorrect. So I stopped and I thought, I'm like, we started talking about, because she has an uncle who's a interestingly enough, he's the world's leading. Apologies if I fuck up the title, but he's the world's leading advisor or what have you in Spanish myth. And she's got a sister that also writes fiction. And we were talking about how for the longest time it was white dudes that kind of ruled the bookshelves, but now everyone's getting a say. And I never thought about this, but I just wanted to write about this train wreck that's an unsolved crime that led to 30 plus dead people, 3 missing people, and over 50 to 80, there's not an exact number, critically injured from this one train wreck that could have been avoided. I never thought about getting the history right with this because I'm like, well, I'm dealing with Irish Americans, dealing with white people, but I didn't think about like, well, there's historians that if you don't take the time to do your research, you're being very ignorant, and you can do better than that. And it's not like to poo-poo anyone, but it's like you're aware of it, so be respectful of the people in the past, of any nation, of any people, you know, even if you're American, like get your facts right as best you can.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's poetic license, of course, like artistic license is fine, but like
sure,
but yeah, like treating it with respect, like not just dumping on, like you say, you know, real people who've really lost their lives or have gone missing. I mean, that's crucial.
And I don't mean to get on my, milk crate and preach, but I mean, I'm from this town. I love it here, and I feel like I love New England, but this feels like home, and I kind of want to live here forever. And I don't want to step on anyone's toes, and I think that you treating the story in Turkey that way is really nice, and I don't know. I just hope that more people deal with it that way. So looking towards that, man. I kind of got off on a tangent, but let's dive into what are you currently reading?
Well, I've actually just finished Slattery Falls by someone called Brennan Nafaro. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but I enjoyed the hell out of that, honestly. And I'm not just saying it like to blow smoke up your ass. I really enjoyed it a lot. I just am a bit of a sucker for like ghost hunting and stuff. And, I used to like watch a lot of the, really over the top, ridiculous TV shows. But I felt the way the book dealt with it was fantastic. And I actually really liked the protagonist's breaking of the fourth wall. I thought it was a really nice thing to have throughout, like that commentary, that kind of grounding with the now. And like, I don't want to go too spoilery, so I'm just going to say the house, under the house, what the fuck? That just made me uncomfortable, made me really uncomfortable. So that's what I just finished reading. So I'm reading 3 things currently. I'm reading The Sadist by Austrian Spencer, and I've only read the first chapter, but like really wonderful prose and really bleak subject matter. So I'm looking forward to that. And like I say, I'm reading Dan Howard's The Clearances. It's the working title for beta read, and also blown away by the first chapter of that. So it's all gold where I am. What about you guys?
I want to jump in.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the kind words, and then I'll throw it to you, Pat. I appreciate that, man. Both your time in, picking that up and reading it, and just saying a couple nice things about it.
Enjoyed the hell out of it, yeah.
I just wanted to say one comment about Slattery Falls. That ending, I beta read that story, and the whole time I'm just thinking like, this is kind of like Devil's Creek. Devil's Creek by Todd Kiesling at the ending. And it's not that they mirror each other, and they just do something different of an underground situation where it's of this world, but it's not. And it's just so cool. And I'm like, man, I wish I thought of that shit. So that's all I got to say. Brennan,
Patrick hasn't read the he read an earlier version, so he doesn't know about the lizard people that come at the end.
Oh my god! And the lizard people are so important, especially with their special sunglasses powers. You're in for a treat when you get to it.
No, it's on. I'm going to be reading it, the finalized version soon. But Brennan, what are you currently reading?
That's perfect, man. Like we discussed it beforehand. He didn't miss a beat.
I think Kev should be our new co-host.
Yeah. So I just finished yesterday, and I want to put out there, I finished Stephen King's new one, Billy Summers, which, the non-Twittery reviews seem to be mostly positive for it, but the Twittery reviews seem to be very negative. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because I would like to encourage people who get like 100, 200 pages in to keep going with it. If not really a big spoiler, but if Alice shows up in the book and you give it 50 pages and you're still not into it, then put it down. But I feel like a lot of people put it down, and I understand why, but I would also encourage them to see it through. And on average, if you give a book 200 pages and it's not grabbing you, you should probably put it down. But it seems to me that, this is an author who's kind of earned that,
Yeah.
and that's, maybe any other author I'd have gotten a bit into that book and said, yeah, not for me. But, you build up a certain trust between author and reader over the course of a career like that. So I really enjoyed the second half, but especially the last, like, say 150, 200 pages. I thought it was really good. And I'm also reading, Glenn Rolfe has a new book coming out actually, when this airs, it comes out tomorrow. August's Eyes, out through Flame Tree Press. And I'm too early on in it to really say anything, but man, I love Glenn's writing, so I know I'm going to enjoy it.
Carly, my God, yes.
He's a really nice guy too.
Yeah, true.
So for me, I started this last night. I'm only a few pages in, but I'm reading Joe Lansdale's chapbook. It's called The Hungry Snow. It's like, I don't know if you guys can see it. It's got this stitched spine, and Death Set Press put it out. Signed copy. I'm like, fuck yeah, this is beautiful. So while I was at Scares That Care, there was this one table that it was these two guys. They were selling all these paperbacks. I saw Stephen King. I went up there. I'm like, they're $2 each. Some are $3, so forth. And he's got Robert McCammon. He's got Shizmar. He's got I got a James Herbert. He's just got a shitload of Lansdale, Peter Straub, and he showed me this. It's called Batman in Terror on the High Skies. Joker, for audio listeners, a Joker is a pirates. Batman's got a sword. It's let's see, it's about a little under 70 pages long. It's put out by Little Brown, and this goes back to 92, and it's dedicated to his kids, Casey and Keith. We're gonna have Keith on at the end of this month. Can't wait for that. And Casey's actually gonna be on in October. That family's full of talent. So the other book I'm currently listening to on audiobooks, Frankenstein, like I talked about. And I just think it's such good writing, and just the history of Mary Shelley's just so sad, but very interesting. I would love to talk to her. Don't think it's gonna happen though. No. and Brendan shaking his head. The other one is John Langan, The Fisherman. I'm only about an hour or two in, but I feel like it's safe to say that it's probably going to be one of the best books in any genre I've ever read. It probably is going to be a top 10. It's just such good storytelling, and that's pretty much it for now. I'm diving every now and then. I'm reading the Books of Blood, Volume 1 through 3, when I got time, and I just started this one called I gotta look it up. Mark Saber, the dude that had that stand with all the paperbacks, said that this was the scariest book he has ever read. So I'm like, all right, I gotta have it. And that book is called Ill Will by Dan Chaon, Chaon. And just said it's terrifying. So that guy's read a lot of horror. I wanted to read it. Let's jump into, if you are listening to this and you're interested in going to our website, it's deadheadspace.com. We got a store there. We can buy some merch. Just got to click on the store tab. We also have articles by a few lovely guests and reviews of books that we have read. It's pretty much all by the guests that we have on. Sirs, final thoughts, and we'll start with Kev.
So final thoughts. Just thanks very much for having me on the show. I hope people have got something out of this. And just both you guys, but also people out there, if you're interested in writing, in creative stuff, then just do it, because like there is no time like the present, and you never know when the time is going to be taken away from you. So just make it happen. Do what you want to do.
That's true. That's sad, but true. Yeah. Brennan, what are your final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I'd echo that one. Usually I just say, hey, Kev, thanks for your Sunday afternoon. We appreciate your time, but I am fully on board with that. Just do it, before you wake up and you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and your neck hurts because you slept on your pillow wrong. Do it now.
My final thoughts My final thoughts are, I meant every word I said, Kev. To my knowledge, is like 4 or 5 people that stood out because of how much they told us that they were listening. You were one of them, and we've wanted to have you on for a while. So below, it was a good excuse to have you on. That will actually come out, August 17th?
August 17th, exactly.
So you're listening to this, if you're listening to this when the day comes out tomorrow. So we encourage you to pre-order it or wait a day and buy it. Silver Shamrock has a lot of good books out. This is just another addition to that long list of excellent books. Kev, we really appreciate your time. And I just want to plug the shirt I'm wearing again because I think it's great for any horror nerd. I use it as a compliment. I think nerds are awesome. It's it's Zebra Books. It covers all 8 books that were published for Zebra Books with Ron. And it's just for me and Brennan, we have talked to a few Zebra authors. We want to talk to a few more, and it's just an interesting time when that wasn't thought of as a very good publisher, but nowadays it's like, wait a minute, they were like the publisher to a lot of us fans. And now next episode will be episode 109 with Glenn Rolfe and guest host Janine Pipe. That airs next Monday. We'll be talking about August Size. That's Glenn's upcoming book through Flame Tree Press. And as always, listeners, we appreciate you choosing us. You have many choices in podcasts. Thank you for sticking with us. Can you hear me and Brennan?
I can hear you super well. How's my mic coming across? Is it okay?
It's coming across great. I'm waking up right now, so if I seem like...
You guys just keep draining the coffee. I've got orange juice here, so I'm also like pretending it's the morning as well.
Welcome to... Can you guys hear that dinging?
Can't hear any dinging.
Okay, that's fucking annoying. I got to figure out how to shut off the notifications. My wife's cell phones... I didn't do this, to be clear. My wife's cell phone's texts pop up on this computer. I don't know why. Oh, she used to have this computer. That's why. Okay.
There's no rhyme or reason to what's going on, behind you or any of us that, the other people can hear. I was doing Cursed Morsels last week, and I had fireworks going off outside, and he couldn't hear them. So I just did the episode with fireworks going on, 100 feet away. Yeah, madness.